this is Tomlin from TomlinHarmonicaLessons.com, and in this week's video I am going to tell you the results of my 28-day practice challenge. So if you didn't know about this, on the 1st of February I started a 28-day challenge where I said I was going to practice for 3 hours a day, and this is something that a bunch of my students were doing as well. They weren't all doing 3 hours a day, but they were all committing to practicing a certain amount. Now, the short story is I failed. I didn't manage 3 hours a day. In fact, I averaged out to about an hour and a half a day over the whole month, which was super frustrating. Got me really angry. There were various reasons why I didn't manage the 3 hours a day. Probably the most difficult one to deal with was I was starting to get pain in my face, which was a little bit weird. So I had to take some time off because of that, because I didn't really want to carry on having pain and I didn't want to do any damage. But as my lovely wife said, the whole point was it was supposed to be challenging. It wasn't necessarily supposed to be something that I actually kind of knocked out of the park. So I failed to reach my goal, but I feel that the month was a massive success. Doing that much practice really made a huge difference in my playing, got me really excited, got me really motivated, and kind of just knocked me up a notch, which was fantastic. And the thing that I really want to talk about is what I've discovered about my students through this challenge. I think that's probably the most interesting thing. I've seen some amazing results, but I've also seen some pretty interesting misconceptions about practice. So these are misconceptions that I have about what my students are doing, and misconceptions that my students have about what practice should be. So first misconception I'd like to tell you about is that practice should sound good. So I got an email from one of my students complaining about the practice session that I live streamed, saying, Tomlin, you sounded really bad. And I thought this was I thought this was a really weird thing, because I assumed that everyone knew that practice should sound bad. If it's sounding good, then you're not practicing, you're playing. Practice is there to iron out all of the rough bits and make them sound better. So that's quite an important thing to bear in mind when you're practicing. If all your practice sounds lovely and fantastic every single time, then you're not pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, you're just playing what you can play already. So you're not going to get better. So that's misconception number one, that practice should sound good. It shouldn't. It should sound bad. Right, second misconception, a couple of reps is enough. So I assumed that when I sent students off to go and practice their scales, they realized that they need to practice them over and over and over and play them thousands and thousands of times. And a whole bunch of students did the 28-day practice challenge and said, I'm going to practice the blues scale for a month for half an hour a day, or I'm going to practice the major pentatonic scale. But they were going to practice one thing, and they got massive results. They got much more fluid when they improvised. Their technique was a lot clearer. Their clean notes were really sweet and rich. And this made me realize that students don't really understand how much they need to practice something for it to be completely integral to their playing. So that's a big misconception that I think we need to try and dispel, which is that just a couple of reps will do the trick. You need to play something a lot for it to be completely integrated in your playing. Okay, so third misconception. So this is one of the misconceptions that I have, and I think a lot of people have, which is that you have to practice for hours and hours and hours and hours every single day in order to make any kind of progress. Now, I averaged an hour and a half of practice every day throughout February, and the improvement in my playing and how I feel when I'm playing in a live situation or in a recording situation is massive. So I didn't do the 5-6 hours a day that a lot of people assume a musician needs to do in order to improve. I did an hour and a half, and that was great. And I had students who did 15 minutes a day, and they got incredible improvements from just 28 days. So that's a really important misconception to dispel. We don't need to do hours and hours and hours every day. The thing that is a complete game changer is the regularity. So practicing a little bit every single day or most days is absolutely massive and will make you so much better and will help you to achieve your goals. Okay, so this is the kind of summary of what I've discovered and what I think my students have discovered from the 28 days. Focusing on one thing is what you should do. Putting in a lot more reps than you think you need to do is key, and always pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone and not relying on playing things that you can play easily to call it practice. It's got to be uncomfortable and it's got to sound bad. Otherwise, you're not working hard enough. So yeah, that's my results from the 28-day practice challenge. I'm gonna carry on with my practice. I'm not going to do 3 hours a day for the rest of March or April or whatever, but I will be doing another practice challenge later in the year, so hopefully you'll join me for that. And yeah, congratulations to everyone who completed the challenge and to everyone who reached their goals. You're awesome. I'm very, very impressed, and I'm sorry that I didn't manage it. All right, I will see you next week for the next harmonica video, and yeah, happy harping. Take it easy.